He formed one in the circle of admirers that surrounded Miss Nellie at the time. She addressed me of the foregoing question. We were all comfortably seated in our deck chairs. The storm of the preceding evening had cleared the sky, and the weather was now delightful. I have no definite knowledge, Mademoiselle replied, but cannot we ourselves investigate the mystery quite as well as the detective Ganimard, the personal enemy of Arsene Lupin? Oh ho, you are progressing very fast, monsieur. Not at all, mademoiselle. In the first place, let me ask you, do you find the problem a complicated one? Very complicated. Have you forgotten the key we hold for the solution to the problem? What key? In the first place, Lupin calls himself Monsieur R. Rather vague information, she replied. Secondly, he's traveling alone. Does that help you? She asked. Thirdly, he is blonde. Well, then we have only to pursue the passenger list, and proceed by process of elimination. I had that list in my pocket. I took it out and glanced through it. Then I remarked, I find there are only 13 men on passenger list whose names begin with the letter R. Only 13? Yes, in the first cabin. And of those 13, I find that 9 of them are accompanied by women, children, or servants. That leaves only 4 traveling alone. First, the Marquise de Raverdan, secretary to the American ambassador, interrupted Miss Nellie. I know him. Major Rawson, I continued. He is my uncle, someone said. Monsieur Revolta? Here, exclaimed an Italian whose face was concealed beneath a heavy black beard. Miss Nellie burst into laughter and exclaimed, That gentleman can scarcely be called a blonde. Very well, then, I said. We are forced to the conclusion that the guilty party is the last one on the list. What is his name? Monsieur Rosaine. Does anyone know him? No one answered, but Miss Nellie turned to the taciturn young man whose attentions to her had annoyed me, and said, Well, Monsieur Rosaine, why do you not answer? All eyes were now turned upon him. He was blond. I must confess that I myself felt a shock of surprise, and the profound silence that followed her question indicated the others present also viewed the situation with a feeling of sudden alarm. However, the idea was an absurd one, because the gentleman in question presented an air of the most perfect innocence. Why do I not answer? He said. Because considering my name, my position as a solitary traveler, and the color of my hair, I've already reached the same conclusion, and now think that I should be arrested. He presented a strange appearance as he uttered these words, his thin lips drawn closer than usual, and his face was ghastly pale, whilst his eyes were streaked with blood. Of course he was joking, yet his appearance and attitude impressed us strangely. But have you not the wound? Said Miss Nellie naively. That is true, he replied. I lack the wound. Then he pulled up his sleeve, removing his cuff, and showed us his arm. But that action did not deceive me. He had shown us his left arm, and I was on the point of calling his attention to the fact when another incident diverted our attention. Lady Gerland, Miss Nellie's friend, came running towards us in a state of great excitement, exclaiming, My jewels! My pearls! Someone has stolen them all. No, they were not all gone, as we soon found out. The thief had taken only part of them, a very curious thing. Of the diamond sunbursts, jeweled pendants, bracelets, and necklaces, the thief had taken not the largest, but the finest and most valuable stones. The mountings were lying upon the table. I saw them there, despoiled of their jewels, like flowers from which the beautiful colored petals had been ruthlessly plucked. And this theft must have been committed at the time Lady Gerland was taking her tea in broad daylight in a stateroom opening on a much-frequented corridor. Moreover, the thief had been obliged to force open the door of the stateroom and search for the jewel case, which was hidden at the bottom of the hat box, open it, select his booty, and remove it from the mountings. Of course, all the passengers instantly reached the same conclusion. It was the work of Arsene Lupin. That day, at the dinner table, the seats to the right and left of Rosaine remained vacant, and during that evening it's rumored that the captain placed him under arrest, which information produced a feeling of safety and relief. We breathed once more. That evening we resumed our games and dances. Miss Nellie especially displayed a spirit of thoughtless gaiety, which convinced me that if Rosaine's attentions had not been agreeable to her in the beginning, she had already forgotten them. Her charm and good humor completed my conquest. At midnight, under a bright moon, I declared my devotion with an ardor that did not seem to displease her. But next day, to our general amazement, Rosaine was at liberty. We learned that the evidence against him was not sufficient. He had produced documents perfectly regular, which showed that he was the son of a wealthy merchant of Bordeaux. Besides, his arms did not bear the slightest trace of a wound. Documents, certificates of birth, exclaimed the enemies of Rosaine. Of course, Arsene Lupin will furnish you as many as you desire. As to the wound, he never had it, or removed it. Then it was proven that at the time of the theft Rosaine was promenading on the deck, to which fact his enemies replied that a man like Arsene Lupin could commit a crime without actually being present. And then, apart from all other circumstances, there remained one point which even the most skeptical could not answer. Who, except Rosaine, traveled alone, was blonde, and bore a name beginning? To whom did the telegram point, if not to Rosaine? And with Rosaine, a few minutes before breakfast, came boldly toward our group. Miss Nellie and Lady Gerland arose and walked away. An hour later, a manuscript circular was passed from hand to hand amongst the sailors, stewards, and passengers of all classes, announcing that Monsieur Louis Rozaine offered a reward of 10,000 francs for the discovery of Arsene Lupin or other person in possession of the stolen jewels. "And if no one assists me, I will unmask the scoundrel myself," declared Rozaine. Rozaine against Arsene Lupin, or rather, according to current opinion, Arsene Lupin himself against Arsene Lupin. The contest promised to be interesting. Nothing developed during the next 2 days. We saw Rozaine wandering about day and night, searching, questioning, investigating. The captain also displayed commendable activity. He caused the vessel to be searched from stem to stern, ransacked every stateroom under the plausible theory that the jewels might be concealed anywhere except the thief's own room. "I suppose they will find out something soon," remarked Miss Nelly to me. "He may be a wizard, but he cannot make diamonds and pearls become invisible." "Certainly not," I replied, "but he should examine the lining of our hats and vests and everything we carry with us." Then, exhibiting my Kodak, a 9x12, which I had been photographing her in various poses, I added, "In an apparatus no larger than that, a person could hide all of Lady Jerland's jewels. He could pretend to take pictures, and no one would suspect the game." "But I've heard it said that every thief leaves some clue behind." "That may generally be true," I replied, "but there is one exception, Arsene Lupin." "Why?" "Because he concentrates his thoughts not only on the theft, but on all the circumstances connected with it that could serve as a clue to his identity. A few days ago, you were more confident." "Yes, but since then I have seen him at work." "What do you think about it now?" she asked. "Well, in my opinion, we're wasting our time." And as a matter of fact, the investigation had produced no result. But in the meantime, the captain's watch had been stolen. He was furious. He quickened his efforts and watched Rozaine more closely than ever. But on the following day, the watch was found in the second officer's collar box. This incident caused considerable astonishment and displayed the humorous side of Arsene Lupin, burglar though he was, but dilettante as well. He combined business with pleasure. He reminded us of the author who almost died in the fit of laughter provoked by his own play. Certainly he was an artist in his particular line of work, and whenever I saw Rozaine, gloomy and reserved, and thought of the double role that he was playing, I accorded him a certain measure of admiration. On the following evening, the officer on deck duty heard groans emanating from the darkest corner of the ship. He approached and found a man lying there, his head enveloped in a thick grey scarf, and his hands tied together with heavy cord. It was Rozaine. He'd been assaulted, thrown down, and robbed. A card pinned to his coat bore these words: "Arsene Lupin accepts with pleasure the 10,000 francs offered by Monsieur Rozaine." As a matter of fact, the stolen pocketbook contained 20,000 francs. Of course, some accused the unfortunate man of having simulated this attack by himself. But apart from the fact that he could not have bound himself in this manner, it was established that the writing on the card was entirely different than that of Rozaine, but on the contrary resembled the handwriting of Arsene Lupin as it was reproduced in an old newspaper found on board. Thus it appeared Rozaine was not Arsene Lupin, but was Rozaine, the son of Bordeaux merchant, and the presence of Arsene Lupin was once more affirmed, and that in a most alarming manner. Such was the state of terror amongst the passengers that none would remain alone in a stateroom or wander singly in unrefuted parts of the vessel. We clung together as a matter of safety, and yet the most intimate acquaintances were estranged by a mutual feeling of distrust. Arsene Lupin was, now, anybody and everybody. Our excited imaginations attributed to him miraculous and unlimited power. We supposed him capable of assuming the most unexpected disguises, of being by turns the highly respectable Major Rawson, the noble Marquis de Raveradon, or even, for we no longer stopped with the accusing of letter R, or even such a person well known to all of us, having a wife, having children, having servants. The first wireless dispatches from America brought no news, at least the captain did not communicate any to us, and the silence was not reassuring. Our last day on the steamer seemed interminable. We lived in constant fear of some disaster, and this time it would not be a simple theft or comparatively harmless. It would be a crime, a murder. No one imagined that Arsene Lupin would confine himself to those two trifling offenses. Absolute master of the ship, the authorities powerless, he could do whatever he pleased. Our property and lives were at his mercy. Yet those were delightful hours for me, since they secured to me the confidence of Miss Nelly. Deeply moved by those startling events, and being of a highly nervous nature, she spontaneously sought at my side a protection and security I was pleased to give her. Inwardly, I blessed Arsene Lupin. Had he not been the means of bringing me and Miss Nelly closer to each other, thanks to him, I could now indulge in delicious dreams of love and happiness. Dreams that I felt were not unwelcome to Miss Nelly. Her smiling eyes authorized me to make them. The softness of her voice bade me some hope. And as we approached the American shore, the active search for the thief was apparently abandoned, and we were anxiously awaiting the supreme moment in which the mysterious enigma would be explained. Who was Arsene Lupin? Under what name, under what disguise, was the famous Arsene Lupin concealing himself? And at last the supreme moment arrived. If I lived 100 years, I shall not forget the slightest detail. "How pale you are, Miss Nelly," I said to my companion as she leaned upon my arm almost fainting. "And you," she replied, "you are so changed. Just think, this is the most exciting moment, and I am delighted to spend it with you, Miss Nelly. I hope that your memory will sometimes revert." But she was not listening. She was nervous and excited. The gangway placed in position, but before we could use it, the uniformed customs officers came on board. Miss Nelly murmured, "I shouldn't be surprised to hear that Arsene Lupin escaped the vessel during the voyage. Perhaps he preferred death to dishonor, and plunged into the Atlantic rather than be arrested." "Oh, do not laugh," she said. Suddenly I started, and in answer to her question I said, "Do you see that little old man standing at the bottom of the gangway, with an umbrella and an olive-green coat? It is Ganimard." "Ganimard? Yeah, the celebrated detective who was sworn to capture Arsene Lupin." "Ah, I can understand now why we did not receive any news from this side of the Atlantic. Ganimard was here, and he always keeps his business secret." "Then you think he will arrest Arsene Lupin?" "Who can tell? The unexpected always happens when Arsene Lupin is concerned in the—" "Oh," she exclaimed, with that morbid curiosity peculiar to women, "I should like to see him arrested. You'll have to be patient, no doubt. Arsene Lupin has already seen his enemy and will be in no hurry to leave the steamer." The passengers were now leaving. Leaning on his umbrella with an air of careless indifference, Ganimard appeared to be paying no attention to the crowd that was hurrying down the gangway. The Marquis de Reveron, Major Rawson, Italian Revolta, and many others already left the vessel before Rosaine appeared. Poor Rosaine. "Perhaps it is he after all," said Miss Nelly to me. "What do you think?" "I think it would have been very interesting to have Ganimard and Rosaine in the same picture. You take the camera. I am loaded down." I gave her the camera, but too late for her to use it. Rosaine was already passing the detective. An American officer standing behind Ganimard leaned forward and whispered in his ear. The French detective shrugged his shoulders, and Rosaine passed on. "Then, my God, who was Arsene Lupin?" "Yes," said Miss Nelly aloud, "who can it be?" Not more than 20 people remained on board. She scrutinized them one by one, fearful that Arsene Lupin was not among them. "We cannot wait much longer," I said to her. She started toward the gangway, and I followed, but we had not taken 10 steps when Ganimard barred our passage. "Well, what is it?" I exclaimed. "One moment, monsieur. What's your hurry?" "I am escorting mademoiselle." "One moment," he said, in a tone of authority. Then, gazing into my eyes, he said, "Arsene Lupin, is it not?" I laughed and replied, "No, simply Bernard Andresi." "Bernard Andresi died in Macedonia 3 years ago." "If Bernard Andresi were dead, I should not be here, but you are mistaken. Here are my papers." "They are his, and I can tell you exactly how they came into your possession." "You are a fool!" I exclaimed. "Arsene Lupin sailed under the name of Yes, another trick of yours. A false scent that deceived them at Havre. You play a good game, my boy, but this time luck is against you." I hesitated a moment. Then he hit me a sharp blow on the right arm, which caused me to utter a cry of pain. He had struck the wound, yet unhealed, referred to in the telegram. I was obliged to surrender. There was no alternative. I turned to Miss Nelly, who had heard everything. Our eyes met. Then she glanced at the kodak I had placed in her hands, and made a gesture that conveyed to me the impression that she understood everything. Yes, there between the narrow folds of black leather in the hollow center of the small object that I had taken the precaution to place in her hands before Ganimard arrested me. It was there I had deposited Rosaine's 20,000 francs and Lady Jerland's pearls and diamonds. Oh, I pledge my oath that at this solemn moment, when I was in the grasp of Ganimard and his 2 assistants, I was perfectly indifferent to everything to my arrest, the hostility of the people, everything except this one question: what will Miss Nelly do with the things I had confided to her? In the absence of that material and conclusive proof, I had nothing to fear, but would Miss Nelly decide to furnish that proof? Would she betray me? Would she act the part of an enemy who cannot forgive, or of that of a woman whose scorn is softened by feelings of indulgence and involuntary sympathy? She passed in front of me. I said nothing, but bowed very low. Mingled with the other passengers, he advanced to the gangway with my kodak in hand. It occurred to me that she would not dare to expose me publicly, but she might do so when she reached a more private place. However, when she passed only a few feet down the gangway, with a movement of simulated awkwardness, she let the camera fall into the water between the vessel and the pier. Then she walked down the gangway and was quickly lost to the sight of the crowd. She had passed out of my life forever. For a moment I stood motionless. Then, to Ganimard's great astonishment, I muttered, "What a pity that I am not an honest man." Such was the story of the arrest, as narrated to me by Arsene Lupin himself. The various incidents which I shall record in writing at a later day have established between us certain ties, shall I say, of friendship. Yes, I venture to believe that Arsene Lupin honors me with his friendship, and that it is through friendship that he occasionally calls on me, and brings into the silence of my library his youthful exuberance of spirit, the contagiousness of his enthusiasm, the mirth of a man for whom destiny has naught but favors and smiles. His portrait? How can I describe him? I have seen him 20 times, and each time he was a different person. Even he himself said to me on one occasion, "I no longer know who I am. I cannot recognize myself in the mirror." Certainly he was a great actor, and possessed a marvelous faculty for disguises. Without the slightest effort, he could adopt the voice and gestures and mannerisms of another person. "Why," said he, "why should I retain a definite form and feature? Why not avoid the danger of a personality that is ever the same? My actions will serve to identify me." Then he added with a touch of pride, "So much the better, if no one can ever say with absolute certainty, 'There is Arsene Lupin.' The essential point is that the public may be able to refer to my work and say, without fear of mistake, 'Arsene Lupin did that.'"